All right, so we are getting started with our first lecture of Blue Phase, Blue Team 101. Let me share my screen here. Everybody can see, thumbs up. Yeah. All right, cool. Let's get started. All right, so we're going to talk about why we have all these colors, a little bit of some of the pedagogy, or maybe the word is andragogy, for why we taught Red Team first. We'll talk a little bit about penetration testing, right? What we've been kind of working on the last 4 weeks. We're going to talk about cybersecurity jobs, right? This is crucial, right? This is the reason that you guys are all here for the most part. It's not just to learn, but also to get yourself into a place where, you can be considered job ready and get an entry level job into cybersecurity that will be both fulfilling to you as well as, financially stable for you. We're going to talk about why we taught offense first. If, most of the actual cybersecurity jobs, the jobs that almost all of you guys are going to be targeting, are defensive jobs. So why did we spend the last 4 weeks going through the PWK course and, attacking boxes? What was the whole point of that? That's what we're going to talk about. I'll give you an overview of what Blue Team is, what we're going to be teaching you in these next, I want to say 5-6 weeks or so. We'll talk about the CISA exam and how we are going to do our best to try and get you prepared to it, and how the content of Blue Team or Blue Phase aligns with CISA. And lastly, we'll get started with a little bit of the fundamentals of the cybersecurity vocabulary that you absolutely need to have. Okay, so first, getting started with penetration testing. We've been doing this, or at least we've been saying we've been doing this for the last 4 weeks. Would anyone give me, do some work for me and try our best to explain what is penetration testing? Start from high level, maybe give me the phases of penetration testing. Let's start there. Ben, thank you for being voluntold. Tell me about penetration testing. What is it? What are the phases?
Penetration testing is exploiting vulnerabilities in other programs, applications. First phase is reconnaissance.
Okay. What else? What's next? Anyone else can jump in and help too. What do we do after reconnaissance, maybe?
Scan to enumerate.
Okay. What about after that?
Gain access.
Okay. And then what do we do after that? And then after that?
Is it privilege escalation?
And then after that?
Reporting.
Yeah, reporting. Right. I think you guys covered that all pretty well, right? These are the general phases of penetration testing. Now, we skipped planning. We didn't really talk too much about that when we were doing Red Team phase. But we definitely did discovery, right? We were scanning networks, try and find out what's on there, did a little enumeration, right? Find out what services, what versions of those services are running. We, found publicly available exploits and attacked those services. And then, at the end of the day, what actual people pay for and what we tried to get you to do is generate some reports. Explain to us, what is it that you did? How did you see it? What is the remediation potentially for this type of attack, right? So again, that attack phase, right? We broke it down. You pretty much said all of these things here, right? There was the reconnaissance. There was that exploitation phase. Once you actually got command execution on the machine, you would try and do privilege escalation, right? Get to root or system. And then, the post-exploit phase, you look around for, when we were doing PWK, that would be looking for any juicy files that you might find to help you on another box, or getting the proof.txt, right? And then, writing your actual report. That was all under the attack phase or post-exploitation. Now, what we didn't talk about, and what's absolutely crucial for, the real world here, is this planning phase. Right. If you listen to a particular Darknet Diaries, I want to say from January, February of last year, There was a story on some folks that were running a pen test on some courthouses. I think the actual episode was called The Courthouse, if anyone had listened to it already. Long story short, these folks thought they had permission from people to do a penetration test on a courthouse. There was some disagreement on who actually was able to give permission to do this penetration test, and these pen testers ended up in jail because of this disagreement. Right. So this is a huge and crucial part in the real world of like actually getting permission to run your penetration test and who is going to give you that permission. And then breaking that down into a much more granular level of like, when are you actually going to run this penetration test? What is it that you are allowed to target? And again, finally, who's authorizing you to do these things? Right. The answers all have to be, you have to get all of these answers before you can do anything else in penetration testing. Right. You could think of our planning phase as, signing up for the PWK course where we get access. But in the real world, you're going to need to be talking to whoever has permission for a particular building, right? Whoever manages particular services, right? You need to know what time and when you are able to run a penetration test, because, what if you're running a penetration test and it's during the middle of the day, during business hours, and you take down a system just by running one of your scans, running one of your brute force attacks, right? It's possible. What happens then? You need permission. Scope, what are you allowed to attack, right? We normally think we're allowed to attack, publicly facing websites and stuff like that, but are you also allowed to do phishing attacks on employees? Is that allowed in your pen test or not? Again, this is all in that planning phase, which, as you guys can start to imagine, if you're thinking about this, really takes up the bulk of the penetration testing phase. Getting all your permission, all these ducks lined up in a row is where most of the time is. It involves lawyers, it involves the actual people that are going to do the penetration test, and it involves high-level decision makers for a company. Now, again, we didn't talk too much about this as we were learning red team stuff, as we were in our red team phase, but it's absolutely crucial that we understand, this is the first part of planning a penetration test. Okay. Discovery, this is where we started, right? This is the reconnaissance, right? We're going to be doing some discovery in blue team phase. So this stuff will look a bit familiar. Reporting, we're also going to be doing this in blue team phase. All right, we have to tell the people what we've found. Cool. All right, so this is penetration testing at a high level and kind of the 1,000-foot view of what we've been doing, spending our time for the last 4 weeks when we were in class. Right, this was the focus of everything. So let's pivot a little bit and talk a bit about cybersecurity jobs. Okay, there are many different cybersecurity jobs, right? We have cybersecurity specialists or IT specialists and IT technologists, right? These are kind of your entry level IT/cybersecurity roles. You have cybercrime investigators, also sometimes in entry level role. Incident response analysts and responders. Right, there's tons of roles that are absolutely available to you. Right, so why don't we start with, let's just have a little bit of discussion here. What are some cybersecurity roles that you guys already know of or have heard of, or maybe you already know someone that has one of these roles? Why don't you get us started off, AB? Can you give us a cybersecurity job that you've heard of before?
Cloud information specialist.
Absolutely, I've definitely interviewed an instructor that had that title. For, I want to say Goldman Sachs or something like that. I don't remember recently, but absolutely, that's a role. Let's go. Let's go down the list. Bo, can you give us a role that you've heard of?
Security engineer. Does that count? Right.
Do you know anything about it too? Maybe we could add to that. Do you know anything about?
I guess it's what do we call it? Like basically a web developer with a security background, sort of.
Could
or
be.
Even a full stack developer with a security background. Anybody who develops with a security background. Kind of.
Absolutely. Anyone who's in the process of like making the engineering tools, right? Like I gotta get that engineer title in there. It's usually would say like a mid-level position too. How about Jeff? Jeff, give us a role.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
SOC analyst or maybe like DevOps.
SOC analyst. Do you know what any of either of those guys do, folks?
SOC analyst is more like security, right? And DevOps is more on the development side, combined with
It's in
IT.
general. Yeah, that's not too bad. Let's get through some of them. What's one? We got some more. Claude, can you give us one?
I can't think of any that have
Come on,
been said already.
there's one. I promise you, you're gonna kick yourself if I hit this
Oh
next
wait,
slide and you see it.
penetration tester.
There we go. Penetration testing, right? There you go. Thank you. Right. One job, absolutely, is penetration tester. Right. This is kind of like, I don't want to say where we were pointing you to, but this is similar to what you've been learning, right? The offensive side of it, right? Being able to generate these reports and find new vulnerabilities on systems and write reports such that the people that develop these systems, that manage them, will be able to fix them and make them more secure, right? Penetration testing is one. Running security assessments. Right, this is where you might do some kind of assessment on a company similar to penetration testing. Might have more to do with legal requirements for how to manage data or things like that. Here, I forget who said it. I think it was Bo said security analyst or engineer, right? Broad titles here. You got the engineers who are building the tools that analysts are generally going to be using. Right. So engineer is going to be someone who generally has some skills with coding, maybe some Python or C++, C#, something like that, right? Some language that they can write code in, and an understanding of what do the analysts actually need, what would make their lives easier, or at least being able to communicate with analysts. So they say, hey, what features do you guys need? We'll be able to write that up. We'll build that tool for you. Then you have the analysts who are actually, looking at raw data, who are using the tools that engineers have made. Usually analysts I'll be honest, is a mid-level position, not exactly an entry-level position, but it's actually super broad. You're going to see, and a lot of our graduates end up with a title, something like security analyst. And, you ask all of them what they do, and you're going to get several different answers. So we'll try and talk a bit about all of those responsibilities that analysts and engineers will have. So like I was saying, it's a mid to senior level position, security analyst or engineer. They have the direct responsibility for protecting, preventing unauthorized access, right? These are the network defenders here, right? That are supposed to harden all of the devices and configure devices and processes. They're usually split up into like a junior and a senior security analyst. Don't let that fool you. Junior security analyst, I'll still say, is a mid-level position. And by mid-level, I mean folks that have security analysts, they usually have between 1 and 4 years of IT experience. Not necessarily security experience, but something related to IT. Maybe help desk, maybe they had experience programming before, some kind of IT level experience. I'm not going to say that that's everywhere, but for the vast majority of analysts that I've seen, they'll usually have between 1 and 4 years of some kind of IT experience. Certs, I will say, will not immediately get you into that tier of security analyst. They absolutely help. 100%, keep that in mind, but most security analysts will have between 1 and 4 years of experience to be that junior level. For senior level security analysts, like I said, I see anywhere from like 5 and 10 years of IT experience. All of those people are going to end up reporting to the CISO. Okay. Other jobs that are available are incident management. Something goes wrong, who are you going to call, right? These are these folks here. They are know how to find evidence and securely, gather that evidence, as well as, okay, things have gone wrong. How do we get things back up? How do we manage incidents? Right? That's their specialty here. A lot of different sort of communication that has to happen when an incident happens, not just on the IT team. Right? There might be people involved in public relations, stuff like that, right? You can imagine big hacks like at FireEye a few, months ago, right? There's definitely people who work in PR that have to communicate these things, both internally and externally. Cool. We have digital forensics. These are the folks that are able to take data and make forensically sound copies of that data, analyze it, right? Gathering evidence like that. There's a lot of overlap between incident management and digital forensics. And usually in incident management, you will have people that specialize in digital forensics. We've got threat analysis, right? People who are able to look around and find out, hey, what are our threats? How likely are our threats to attack us, to do something like that, right? They're keeping their eyes to the ground, their eyes open for potential threats, and I'm talking things like organized crime, to things like advanced persistent threats like nation states, that may be ongoing. Cool. And then you have cybersecurity policy. People that work here generally is at like the CISO level, right, or management. They lead the organization not through their direct like IT skills, so much as providing leadership and governance. They're going to be setting the policies that your senior security analysts and engineers are going to be following the day to day, if that makes sense. Okay. So these are all sorts of roles are available to you within this umbrella of cybersecurity. Not all of them will be available to you right away, right? Obviously, right? You can't just go right from full stack to getting a CISO position. But I want you all to be aware and start thinking about a potential track so that you can find your niche in cybersecurity, because it is absolutely incredibly broad, and you will be able to find things that are of interest to you. And that's what will make you really good at your job. Now, I will say that most of the folks that graduate from here, their jobs, the title that they end up getting is security analyst. So I want to focus a little bit more under analyst, talk a bit about the functions that they'll have and what they actually do day to day. And this is from me speaking to graduates and kind of just looking around at job postings and stuff like that. So what are the analyst functions? What are you going to be doing if you get your job as a cybersecurity, junior analyst? So number one, you're going to be in charge of implementing and configuring security controls, right? So that means putting in firewalls and configuring those firewalls, for example, putting in intrusion detection systems and, analyzing what data they give you. That's going to be your job, your responsibility. Potentially, you're going to be working in a SOC or CSIRT. SOC, I forgot. I have a couple of pictures of the SOC at Wayfair. It's pretty cool. You got screens everywhere, but that's generally where a lot of the analysts end up working, inside a room called a SOC or a CSIRT, which is the Computer Emergency Response Team, something like that. Computer Incident Response Team. So when something goes wrong, right, these are like the Ghostbusters for that. Other things you might be doing are auditing security processes and procedures, taking a look at what procedures are already on the books at your company and saying, hey, are we following the law? Are we doing things right? Like, could things be better, right? So you're constantly evaluating what procedures you currently have. It's a constant iterative process. Other things you might be doing as an analyst are conducting risk assessments. That means, scanning your network, even running things just like Nikto and OpenVAS to see if, running vulnerability scanners, right? Even running your own kind of like mini penetration test to determine if your organization is vulnerable to something, and then being able to do something about it. Additionally, you're going to be expected to maintain up-to-date threat intelligence. One common question that you might get asked in interviews is, how do you keep up to date in cybersecurity? And it's not just like one of those questions to see that you're interested in cybersecurity. I mean, it is, but it's also kind of because it's a requirement to be up to date. You need to, depending on the organization you work for, be up to date on the modern threats. What organizations are doing, like what offensive campaigns are organizations running? Right. And this information is available publicly through companies like FireEye and CrowdStrike. Right. I'm being straight up with you guys. There are foreign nation states and black hat hackers that are running offensive campaigns against organizations constantly. And there are also blue team organizations that are always watching these campaigns that go underway. And they share this information publicly so that everyone on the defensive side can be stronger and be aware of what bad guys are doing. So again, it's going to be up to you. It's going to be one of your responsibilities as an analyst to be up to date on this stuff. Right? So you're going to become familiar with websites and companies like CrowdStrike and FireEye, right? So to get your information on what are the modern day threats doing, because you need to defend against them. Other things that people, oh, sure.
Sorry. What kind of industries is this role like most common in?
The analyst?
Mhm.
Oh gosh. Many big tech companies. So I know folks, for example, I know one girl that's working as an analyst that has literally that title at Hinge, the dating app. So big tech companies come to mind. I think of banks. I think of healthcare. I think of government organizations, and I think of really large IT or technical companies. Any of those places are generally going to have a SOC, or they will outsource their SOC. And we'll talk a bit more about like what goes on in a SOC and what goes on there. Does that answer your question necessarily? Companies are going to have analysts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Matt, before you start
yes.
up again, your video went out.
My video went out. Well, let's put it back on. Thanks. Cool. All right. Other things that you may be required to do are be up to date on legal compliance, regulatory issues. Right? No one's going to expect you to be a lawyer, but depending on the business sector that you work in, right? Say you handle credit card information, you're going to be expected to know a bit about PCI DSS, right? About the legal laws for managing credit card information and that kind of personally identifiable information. All right, that's going to be under your responsibility. So we're going to talk about a lot of these things, and also many, many more, that are not listed here. These are the broad analyst functions that you can expect. And like I said, I want to say, and then I am pulling this number out of my butt here, greater than 60% of the people that are graduating from this program end up with a title similar to analyst. So I'm saying this is very broadly what you can expect. Cool. So let's talk about SOCs. I'll try and find the picture of Wayfair SOC because it's cool looking. But what is a SOC? It's a physical location, right? It's a physical location where the entire security team is going to get together and monitor and protect all of the information and assets of an organization. Generally, they look really cool. They've got a whole bunch of screens up. You'll have a whole bunch of dashboards and things like that. You have people working around computers. Right. Usually, again, and this is kind of piggybacking off of what Nisa had, her question, right, which is usually going to be existing for larger organizations. All right. So governments have SOCs, large corporations have SOCs, healthcare organizations have SOCs, right? These are the big organizations that I would expect to have them. If you don't have them, but you're a small company, oftentimes you will outsource your security team. And so there are companies that literally, work as a SOC for other companies. Requirements to be a SOC, right? You need to have the authority to make decisions, to be able to, pull the plug on servers if that's what you want to do, if that's what's required, to defend something, right? You can imagine that there could be security organizations that don't have this ability to operate, right? They can't really do too much then, right? So SOCs have authority to be able to, override certain things generally, take systems down, spin them back up. Generally, the people that work in the SOC, they're going to be motivated, they're going to be super skilled, and they're going to be, this used to say paranoid professionals, but I've changed it now to skeptical. I think you need to be not paranoid, but very skeptical of pretty much everything you see if you want to be pretty effective as an analyst. So there's that. You'll often be performing incident response. So if something goes wrong, investigate it. What happened? Right. We'll talk more about what incident response actually looks like another day.
I'm not sure if you know, but how are these centers like handling being remote and COVID and things like that?
That is a great question. I don't have a direct answer for you right now. I know Jackie's working on getting some folks that work in SOCs to come talk to us a few times in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to push to, I'm going to tell you to hold that question for then, because I think that's a really good question. I don't know what the answer is. How it is certainly a challenge that they're facing now, or had to face. There are also some organizations where everything has to be done in person on premises. So We talk about a bit about those too. I definitely know someone who's graduated and had to work at an on-prem place. So, okay. Other responsibilities of SOCs is to separate the signal from the noise. You're going to be seeing that you get tons and tons of information, alerts and logs, artifacts, all sorts of information, way more than you could ever possibly look at. A lot of the job is going to be, filtering data down to manageable bite-sized pieces and being able to separate, right, the signal from the noise, to be able to understand, right, is this something bad or is this baseline? Is this normal? Right? And that is a very difficult problem to solve, right? We're gonna talk about different ways that we can go about different approaches to solving this, but it is a real challenge, and that is part of the day-to-day of working in a SOC. Okay, and then finally, what's another expectation of SOCs is they collaborate with each other. They collaborate a lot. Like I told you, threat intelligence is a real thing, right? FireEye, CrowdStrike, other organizations put out IOCs, indicators of compromise, and other frameworks to help you find bad guys, right? Like indicators of compromise are things you can look for that say, hey, bad guys have been here. And other SOCs will put this out. They'll say, hey, we know this, APT27 has, is known to do this particular thing. And this is how you can look for it. These are the IOCs. It's going to be your job working in a SOC to, collaborate with these other SOCs. Maybe your organization gets hacked. It's going to be your job to share the information. How did this happen? Right? It is incredibly collaborative work. There's no way that you'd be able to be successful on the defensive side if it were not. Okay. So all this talk of blue team and colors and, penetration testing not being a job that's for most of us right now. So the question that we kind of have next is, why did we do red team first? Right. So to start, I want to I have this little chart here of what I believe to be the attributes and skills of an effective analyst. Okay. I think there's these, 5 core attributes that are incredibly important if you want to be an effective blue teamer or defender, right? You need to be able to enjoy challenges. You need to be an absolute problem solver who can solve them, with a methodical and, kind of detail-oriented approach. You need to be constantly learning. You need to have a mindset that you want to actually protect things and be reliable, and you need to be able to communicate with others as a consultant. And these are absolutely the core attributes that are, everything we've talked about, right? You can see how they all kind of map to these things right here. And right, we can map each of those things to skills that are required, right? Being able to manage risk, being able to ask yourself, what if? If you were someone who ever liked to play like chess or checkers by yourself and flip the board over and over, this is where you're going to be happy, right? Because that is a requirement. Right? You need to be a problem solver. We've been doing a lot of that in Red Team, right? Hands-on problem solving. You need specific industry knowledge, right? We're gonna talk about specific industry tools you're gonna have to be familiar with. And tools are constantly changing all the time, so you need to be constantly learning. You need that mindset of being a guardian, right? You need to know the applicable laws and policies, right? Just as I said before. And you need absolutely crucial communication skills. I think one of the, I don't want to say more surprising things I've noticed now that I've been with full stack for a while is the folks that are able to find work the fastest are usually not necessarily the best at red team or blue team or, even the hands-on keyboard skills, but they were really good at communicating and getting people to onboard on things, right? Absolutely 100% these people find jobs faster. At least this is my just noticing, right? I didn't actually take data, I'm just noticing. So these are the skills I'm saying are required for finding a job and being an analyst. And so, why did we do red team first, right? That's the question, right? And I'm telling you what makes a good analyst. And so here's my next question for you. It's a series of questions, really. We're going to ask, is this offense or defense? So is this offense or defense?
Both.
I'd call it both.
Okay. What's that?
Both.
Go on.
Both.
Oh.
Oh, what about this one though?
Both.
But scripting?
Offense.
Only offense? Who said offense? Not defense? No good? Not both?
Both.
About this?
Both.
It's all both.
It's all both, guys. Spoilers, right? All of the skills, everything we've been doing is all the same, right? These are all the same skills that we've been working on offensive side, on our red team phase. They're all the same skills you're going to need for blue team phase and for getting a job, right? All of these things, they're not red team or blue team. They are just the skills you need in IT. Right? Everything that we've done is it's the foundational knowledge for any, like all of these concepts are the foundational knowledge for any cybersecurity training program, straight up, whether it's an offensive program or a defensive program. And so really what we have is a different method of teaching, right? The tool will change, right? The knowledge will be the same. The why will be the same. And once you understand that, once you have all of those concepts, you can adapt. You can learn the specific tool, right? Even if the tools are the same for most of these concepts. Okay. Other reasons I want to, be sure, why did we do red team first? Offense is more fun. Offense is more fun. There's, I won't lie to you, right? Blue team stuff is just not, offense is more fun. You root things, you win, you hack them, you end up owning it, right? There's competitions called Pwn to Own where you literally hack something and then you get to own it. I saw one recently where they hack a Tesla and just walk out with the Tesla, right? So what do you need though? You need passion, right? You absolutely 100% need passion. Cybersecurity, this industry is not a role, like there's easier ways to make money is what I would say. And if you want to be effective in cybersecurity, passion is requirement, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing is you need to be a lifelong learner. Absolutely. You like everything we have taught you in full stack, one is not enough. And two, all of the tools, the techniques, the game's changing every day, right? So being a constant learner is your advantage because nobody knows everything. So as long as you are constantly learning, that is your way into this industry. There's no way that you can say, okay, I've earned my OSCP. Maybe that happens. I've got my Sec Plus and my CISA, and I've got CISSP now, right? Maybe this happens for all of you, and it may. You don't stop learning at that point, right? Because once you stop learning, other people are going to be catching up, and then the technology is going to be changing, right? The industry is moving so fast that all of the techniques and then the tools and the practices that are being taught today are going to be obsolete in, I want to say years, may even be less time. So you need to be constantly learning, okay? Other reasons we stayed red team first is gamification is to make you a lifelong learner, right? Lifelong learner, games are fun, right? Rooting things is fun, getting flags is fun. This is why we did offense first. Offensive cybersecurity, again, is better gamification than blue team gaming. Like we have actually tried what does blue team gaming look like and defending things. And it's not quite generally as fun. And I don't think gives the same mindset that's needed. I think a lot of times when you end up teaching blue team first, you end up thinking in terms of lists, like checklists, like, okay, we got to check this, and then we check this, and then we check this, and then we check this. And if everything's checked, we're defended. But that's not the way to be thinking, right? Defenders think in lists, and who was it? Michael Cranch, my mentor, told me. Defenders think in lists, and attackers think in graphs, right? What happens when something didn't work for you right away on red team? Well, you would try something else. What happens when something doesn't work after you've defended it on blue team, right? You've failed and you've lost. Right. So what's the point I'm trying to make? Offensive techniques, develop a better security mindset, right? You guys are way more resilient now than you were just a few months ago, right? I have set you guys up with this inherent expectation that you are going to fail repeatedly and often. And that cycle of repeatedly failing developed, I think, hopefully developed better problem solving and better coping mechanisms too. And, you know, I would say there's even, you know, your brains are better now. Now think about defender training, you know, in defender training, like you can look at a couple of these apps. They're absolutely out there. You know, when you graduate, you take a look. You know, defending training, you rarely fail when you're defending training. You're like, okay, we patched this, successful. Like, okay, we, you know, removed this service that didn't need to be there. Okay, successful, right? That's what happens when you do blue team training, kind of. You know, it's you know, the defender rarely fails in the training, and you don't get that sort of self-reflection. You don't get that coping method, right? You don't get that everything, you know, you hit your head against the wall for a while, right? That was part of why we do red team first. And yeah, you know, offense, I'll tell you, is not harder than defense at the intro level, right? I want to be straight up. You guys are not penetration testers, but you did a little bit of penetration testing, right? You did a little bit of the intro level, right? You looked for publicly available exploits, you transferred files, you used Metasploit, right? You did some of the basic things that, again, are some of those same skills that are required for blue team, right? And you developed the security mindset, right? That's not natural for most people. Most people don't have security mindset like Bruce Schneider describes, right? It's not natural for engineers, right? Good engineering is like thinking about how to make things work. I'll tell you all about the full stack web development problem. That's how they think, right? That's how we train them to think, how to get things to work. Security mindset, right? We're training you how to make things fail, how to make things break, right? How to think like an attacker, how to think like an adversary, how to think like a criminal. And you don't exploit the vulnerabilities you find, but if you don't look at the world in that way, you're not going to find them. Okay. So this is all the reasons that we, you know, spent these last 4 weeks teaching offensive security, even though, you know, I do not expect anyone to be getting a job there right away. Okay. Cool. So let's transition to what blue team is, what you can expect for the next few weeks and, you know, in work. And blue team is really all about storytelling, right? You know, if you are good at storytelling, rules of 3, effective communication, you know, you will find that you will do well in blue team, because defense is all about telling stories, right? You need to know, what questions do you have to ask when something happens? When is it appropriate to ask these questions? How do you answer these questions, right? What evidence are you looking for to go about answering these questions? What story is this evidence telling? Okay, you have evidence, but what is the actual story now? Who needs to hear the story? Is this people, you know, is it a different department that needs to hear it? Or does this need to be bumped up to, you know, your manager or even the C-suite, right? Who needs to hear what's happening? And what story do I need to tell them? Because, you know, not everybody, you know, the CISO doesn't need to know all of the details of an incident, but they do need to know some kind of story about it, right? You need to decide how you talk to different people and how do you effectively communicate to them. Okay. Thankfully, we have a framework to help us. We're going to be referencing this framework throughout all the blue team phase. It is out there. You can look for it online. It's the NIST cybersecurity framework. And it has 5 planks or 5 platforms. And we're kind of going to go around it clockwise, essentially. So there's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And this is kind of going to be how you go about approaching being a cybersecurity analyst. Just as you sort of had a set of phases for penetration testing, we have a kind of a set of phases for, you know, what you're doing when you're a cybersecurity analyst. Again, this is just one framework, but we're going to be following it. It's one of the most popular ones. Go ahead and Google NIST cybersecurity framework on your own. Okay, so first, identify. Again, this is very similar to the reconnaissance phase of penetration testing, right? This is where you find out everything that you have. You're building the map, right? You're going to look at what systems you have, both hardware, right, actual physical systems and virtual systems. What people you have, again, assets, physical and virtual, what data you have, and what are your capabilities, right? This is a constant process that's going to be going on. What do we actually have to protect, right? What is inside and outside your organization? Who are the bad guys, right? We have to model that. What are the assets that I have? And how do we model our threats? How do we expect our threats to behave? That's the first rung of the framework. Next, we have protect. Right? This is where you're going to be, perhaps patching, implementing appropriate safeguards like firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and prevention systems, configuring them, reading logs, determining what tools and technologies you need to implement or use now that you have the map of everybody. Right? You know what software and hardware you have. How do we go about defending it? What walls do we need to set up? What defenses do we need to set up to actually protect our resources, our assets? Okay. Once we've done that, once we get that phase kind of set up, we enter a kind of detection phase, right? How do we know if we've been hacked? What should we be listening for? How do I determine if a cybersecurity event has occurred? Right? This is that like constant listening phase. Once we've already set things up, right? Our defenders have now been breached. We get some kind of alert. What do we mean? What does it mean, right? Is this an actual bad thing happen? Is this a nation state or other organization taking down our website and in some kind of denial of service, distributed denial of service attack? Or is it, a super big holiday sale that you have going on and it's just a ton of traffic, right? You might get an alert that you're getting a DDoS. It's your job as an analyst to determine, are we being DDoSed, right? Determining what do these logs mean? What's normal? What is anomalous behavior? Tons of questions that you're going to be asking yourself in this detection phase, okay? Right? Bad guys have gotten in, you've detected it, right? You've determined that there is, yes, a cybersecurity incident. This is not a bunch of traffic because we have a sale. This is an actual distributed denial of service attack. What do we do? How do we respond to this now? What are the appropriate actions that we need to take now that we have this incident? Generally, this might be following some kind of playbook. This might be alerting people, right? If there are live attackers, what do we do? Do we listen to see what they're going to do, or do we start trying to kick them out? If we start trying to kick them out, they're going to know we're starting to try and kick them out. So, if we're going to start taking evidence, how do we take that evidence so that it's admissible in court? How do we build legal cases, right? How do we write an incident report? And then finally, once we're done with our response and we've brought systems back up to normal, we bring our systems back to normal. It's kind of respond kind of bleeds into recover here. But how do we get everything back to normal? Okay. And return ourselves back to that sort of detect phase. This is where you're going to be doing things like making a postmortem, right? Well, you're going to look at all of the evidence that happened and say, hey, what could we have done better? Right? What went well? What did not go well? This absolutely happens, right? For example, maybe there was a particular bug on some software for your company's organization. You don't currently have a bug bounty program. Maybe implementing a bug bounty program would help. This means that anyone that finds it publicly now has an incentive to, actually tell you instead of just, not doing anything. Okay. So that brings us back to our whole cybersecurity framework. We're going to be following this. Many days are going to be mapped to a lot of these kind of pillars here. Okay. Any questions before I move on? Oh, I think I don't have chat open. Oh, this is a trick question. Okay. I don't see anything new in chat. I have chat open now, so sorry I missed if anything. Okay. All right. So that brings us to CISA. Okay. There's a few things I want to talk to you guys about. You guys should by now have this textbook, something like this. If you don't have it, you have a digital copy of it. We're going to be going through it pretty much cover to cover. There's a few things I do want to talk to you about at the CISA though. So what is it? First, it's the exam for cybersecurity analysts. Again, we're targeting that sort of role because there's one, it's broad, and two, that's what most graduates end up targeting and getting. Okay. It aligns with the NIST cybersecurity framework. A lot of the text that you're going to be reading in the textbook actually mentions the NIST framework and has direct references to the NIST cybersecurity framework. So awesome. We're doubling up our learning. It covers a broad array of jobs. Again, you can speak to many folks that have the title cybersecurity analyst, and all of them will tell you slightly different things for what they do. It requires analysis beyond just memorization. A lot of that is because they'll give you logs and tell you to analyze what's going on in these logs, firewall logs, snort rules, PCAPs, data flow, all this stuff. You're going to be required to analyze it and determine, hey, what's going on here? Is this bad? Is this not bad? Stuff like that. Now, there's also a CISA. There's a CISA 2.0 now. It just changed. I want to say, I forget when now, but recently. October 21st. All right, someone knows because I guess they just got cut from it, right? Because you didn't take that one. You're taking the next one. That's fine. So let's talk about the differences between CISA and CISA 2.0. All of the content that is currently in CISA is also in CISA 2.0. CISA 2.0 only has more content. So what does that mean for you? If you want to go for this certification, I would say after graduation, with about a week or two of study, you should be in a good place to sit for the exam. Sit for the 2.0 exam, right? Because we'll be covering almost everything for the CISA 1.0. 2.0 is just a bit more in addition to it. Okay, so what is the exam objectives of it? I'm going to try my best most days to also point out what we're targeting, because they give you all these objectives. But number one thing, and this is how it was broken up in CISA 1.0, CISA 2.0 has slightly different percentages. Like they've changed by like 4% each. So like, a couple questions here and there have shifted. But these topics are all covered. So the first one is threat management. So you'll understand reconnaissance and responding to it, and enterprise security practices, right? That's going to be a number one thing. Talk about vulnerability management. All systems have vulnerabilities. How do you manage them? How do you find them? How do you categorize them? We're going to actually, talk about specifically, hey, I've got this particular vulnerability. How do I rate how bad it is? Let's actually give it a number. We have different ways we can do that. You'll learn how to read those. We have incident response, right? We're going to look at some of the toolkits that are available when an incident happens. We're going to talk about different communication plans. We're going to do a lot of role playing on some days. We'll talk about how to do respond and how to actually recover. And 4.0 is the security architecture and tool sets. So learning about different kind of documents, different kinds of architecture, firewalls, IDS, IPS, all of this sort of stuff falls under that security architecture. Learning how to set up secure network architecture like VPNs and subnets and all of that stuff kind of fits under there. You'll notice it's about split up relatively evenly at about a quarter each. It hasn't changed too much since 2.0. I'll say there's just a little bit more content. With regards to the study guide, we're going to be reading excerpts from the book. That'll generally be your pre-reading for the and pre-work for the day, depending on the day. We'll also be using online resources, which I'll show you guys. Essentially, they are just the questions that are in the book. I'm going to be giving you guys roughly 30 minutes a day, specifically to look through these questions, do them, and then have some time to discuss. As well as I've made some of my own questions that we'll discuss during morning review. But essentially, I want to make sure that everyone gets some practice for the CISA Plus exam every day, pretty much. And we're going to be doing the practical skills in class, right? During workshop time, that's going to be lots of report writing, installing and using new software that we haven't yet, and all sorts of the actual kind of hands-on keyboard things. We're going to be doing that stuff in class. Okay, so I've been speaking for a long time. We're going to give you guys to take a little break and then actually take a look at some of these practice questions that you're going to be working on again. So let's show you how and what I mean by that.
So I have a quick question, Matt.
Yeah.
So CISA 2.0, how much more difficult is that exam as opposed to what it was before?
You're asking me a question I don't know how to answer for you. There's more
Okay.
content, so it's a little bit harder. But at the end of the day, straight up, it's a multiple choice test, guys. If you have studied for multiple choice tests and standardized tests in high school or in college, it is the same sort of skill. I have taken 3 CompTIA tests. I haven't taken the CISA one. I'm going to take the CISA 2.0 probably when you guys do at the end of this. And it is the same way to study for them as if you had studied for the MCAT, or if you had studied, well, maybe not the MCAT, or the GRE, or what's that MBA test? I don't know. If you study for any of those multiple choice tests, and we'll go through this too. Like I'll have a little bit of each day cut out for this type of test taking skill of kind of reading, being able to pull out the important context clues, and eliminating choices, right? Like those are these skills that are pretty much will lead you to the best chance of passing the certification first try. It is not a hands-on test, right? It's multiple choice. So if you have strong reading skills and you've just seen a lot of these questions because they ask them a certain way, a CompTIA sort of way, then like I said, I think that there is a greater than 85% chance after 2 weeks of studying after a program that you can take this CISA exam and pass. So I'd say that's where I would put my math in if I'm pulling numbers out of my butt right now.
Just one more question. How much overlap is there with Sec Plus and CISA Plus?
Oh, there's a solid amount of overlap, less with Sec Plus and CISA Plus, a solid amount of overlap, ports and protocols. That's the biggest thing I say, as well as compliance and law. There's a lot of overlap there. If you give me some time, I will be able to grab the difference. I had something open that had the 2 differences, the 2 objectives open.
So could Sec Plus be thought of as kind of like a subset of CISA?
I think so. So if you look at CompTIA's website, they have a suggested path for certifications. They have like this A+, which is, just really basic computing. Then the Sec Plus, or then the Network Plus, which is like OSI models and protocols and things like that. You have the Sec Plus, which is the security-ish version of that. And then I would say right above Sec Plus, they have these 2 certs, these 2 like brother sister certs called Pen Test Plus and CISA Plus. That's their offensive side and their defensive side certifications that are what they call mid-level.
So if we haven't gone for the Sec Plus at this point, would it be beneficial to wait until after we have completed the blue team section to maybe take it?
I think that's a reasonable thing to do. Yeah, I think either of those certs. I think the Sec Plus or the CISA Plus, if you study specifically for them for about 2 weeks after graduating this program, after finishing, you will be able to pass greater than 85%. That's my thing. That's what I would suggest. Like, there's a couple of resources online I'll point you to, but most of it would be Test Bank. Like, just download a test bank and just practice a bunch of the questions until you're getting greater than 85% of them right, because that's exactly what the test is like. Yeah, and a lot of the big difference between CISA Plus and Sec Plus is CISA Plus asks a bunch more questions. Like, they'll give you a log, an excerpt from a log or something like that, and ask you about it. Sec Plus doesn't do that. Those are bigger changes. Okay. So here, let's get you guys some practice actually answering some of these questions. If you already have a physical book, you can also, I believe you should be able to access this resource as well. I can't anymore because mine expired, but I will show you what it should look like. Let's see.